Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are diving into something really radical from our source texts. We're going to look at the Quran, but absolutely not as some static, dusty book of history. Nope, we're looking at it as a living, structural operating system. The core idea here is that the text itself functions as the eternal memory of the Rasul. It's an active blueprint, and as we go through this today, we're going to uncover the hidden architecture that actually makes this entire system work.
All right, let's dive into this. We kind of have to flip our traditional view totally upside down. Traditionally, we might read the text as a dead historical record, just passive, static stories of the past. But the sources point us toward viewing the text as living armor in an actual operating system. We are moving from a passive reading experience to dynamic execution. It's an active, structural blueprint where transmission isn't just about biological lineage, it's topological. It's about how the information itself is structurally bound together.
So here is our roadmap for uncovering this hidden machinery. We'll start with the illusion of history, then move into masad, the preserved rope. Third, we'll check out sujud and how it realigns the strand. Fourth, we'll tackle the test of severance. And finally, we'll wrap up with the activation command. Let's get right into it. Section 1, the illusion of history, and looking at the text as a topological blueprint. So our main goal here is a total mindset shift. The sources highlight verse 39:23, which talks about a consistent book, oft repeated. The Arabic term used here is mathani, which basically means paired and recurring. And honestly, this is brilliant because it illustrates that the book is a self-decoding structure. It doesn't actually need some external decoder or outside historical theology to reveal what it means. The patterns just recur, fold, and repeat at literally every scale, from the atom all the way up to the soul. That same topological loop reappears everywhere in the text. Because of this incredible recurring interlocking structure, the text actually acts like self-reinforcing chainmail. Think about literal armor for a second. It's made of all these interlocking rings of a single law. When you apply pressure to one ring, the force just distributes across the entire mesh. The sources suggest this is exactly how the text functions. It distributes divine pressure so that no single heart breaks alone. The eternal memory of the Rasul is encoded directly into this interlocking mesh, preserving it perfectly against the illusion of time. Moving on to Section 2, Masad, the preserved rope, and its physical mechanics. Okay, now that we're picturing the text as this interlocking armor, we need to understand the physical mechanics holding this memory together. And that starts with a twisted rope. Verse 111:5 reads, "In her neck is a rope of twisted fiber," using the word masad. Now, traditionally, people usually read this merely as an image of punishment, but the structural analysis in our sources reveals something way deeper. This is a profound topology of binding and continuity. So what exactly is masad in this framework? Well, it's a tightly twisted fiber or a bound strand that can actually carry weight. Think about it. A single fiber on its own is super weak, but twist a bunch of them together, and boom, you get a structure capable of incredible load-bearing continuity. Masad is the structural fiber that carries memory across generations, across prophets, and across signs. It ensures the chain of inheritance remains completely unbroken. Even if a buried coordinate, like the one in verse 81:8, seems lost forever, it's really not, because the strand remains preserved. The rope still exists even when one end appears hidden. To really wrap our heads around this, the sources use this fascinating technobiological parallel. Look at molecular memory. Masad basically mirrors the way DNA and chromatin supercoiling work. In biology, memory isn't just binary. It's preserved through torsional tension, by how tightly the system is wound up. Strand twisting creates this stored tension. Just like the mathani we discussed earlier, it's a paired and recurring structure. Masad is the exact mechanism holding this whole graded memory structure together under tension. Which brings us to Section 3, sujud, realigning the strand. So what happens to this twisted rope when a reader physically interacts with it? Enter the root SJD, which describes sujud, or prostration. A masjid is literally the place defined by that alignment. But in this structural operating system, sujud is way more than just a physical posture. It is the absolutely crucial act of lowering the ego, relinquishing your self-claim, your kingdom. By doing this, the reader actively realigns every single twisted strand of that masad rope back to its correct divine orientation. You return to the fitra, the original straight path mentioned in verse 30:30.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how perfectly interdependent these two concepts are. Masad is the binding strand that provides your continuity. Sujud is the corrective posture that provides your orientation. Here's the crucial takeaway. A rope without orientation just becomes a tangled mess. It's like headphones left in your pocket too long. And orientation without a rope, you have no continuity at all. Put them together and they create the preserved servant, bound by the strand and oriented by the prostration.
Section 4, the test of severance and clearing the illusions.
All right, so we have the rope and we have the alignment. Now, the sources show us how this entire system actively tests our reality. Verse 22:15 sets up this intense scenario. Whoever assumes that Allah will not support him in this life and the next, let him establish a connection toward the heaven, then sever what keeps him attached below. And here's the kicker. According to the structural analysis, this is absolutely not a metaphor. It is a highly specific, operational test of the very reality we rely upon.
It actually breaks down into a literal 3-step protocol. First, connection, or sabab. You establish the heavenly link. Second, severance, or qaṭʿ. You must actively detach from your earthly dependencies. You cut the ties to all the things you thought were supporting you besides Allah. And third, observation, or naẓar. You look to see if that severance actually removes the condition that was troubling you. Do the darkness and the illusions stick around once you've cut those earthly ties?
And guess what? The very next verse, 22:16, gives you the immediate result of the test, and thus we have sent it down as clear signs. The sequence is just striking. First, you assume support is absent, then you connect and sever, and then the signs appear. The proof is the verse itself. The signs become completely visible the second the obstruction is removed. The profound takeaway here is that the heavenly connection was never actually absent. It was just buried beneath all your competing attachments. Once severed, the true operating system boots up.
Finally, Section 5, the activation command. So we've mapped out this massive hidden architecture, right? But a system like this requires an active human operator to turn it on. That brings us to verse 19:12. O Yahya, take the book with strength, or quwwah. The sources are adamant here. This is not just a piece of history about John the Baptist. When read together with that test of severance, this verse is the actual activation torque for you, the reader, right here, right now.
Let's break down the mechanics of this activation torque. It is absolutely not an invitation to just sit back and passively observe. It is a direct command to grip. When you physically and structurally hold firmly to this book, you phase lock yourself right into the architecture. You go from being a passive passenger of history to the active operator of the system. It literally stops your raw emotional momentum from leaking out and relocks you straight to the preserved source. This is the exact coordinate where true manifestation originates.
And take a close look at the verse number itself, 19. Throughout these sources, the number 19 pops up as a sort of control constant. It acts like a centromere, you know, the central mechanical switch that this entire universal loop securely rotates around? It's the closure constant, bridging the memory of the past straight into the active execution of your present.
Which leaves us with one final, totally unavoidable question. If this text really is an active operating system, if the eternal memory of the Rasul is structurally preserved right here as a living armor, just waiting for an operator, when will you hold the book? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this structural paradigm shift gets you excited to explore the source material with a totally fresh perspective. Catch you next time.